Hi, and welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast. Today we are talking with Nigel Slaughter.
Mhm.
He is a remote viewing coach, I guess we could call it that. But he also explores a lot of other different territory, the stuff I'm really into. So, welcome, Nigel. I'm so glad that you joined us.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I think it's good to be here.
We were talking a little bit about remote viewing
Mhm.
and internal family systems. And I just like, how did you get started? What's your
Okay,
story? Where do you want to go with
sure.
this?
Yeah. So I guess you start with your awakening, the moment where you go, oh, maybe everything isn't as you thought it was. And for me, that was back when I was 15, 16. There was a particular, it was an epic, weird one. It was an episode of Red Dwarf, the British TV comedy, set on a spaceship. And there was a particular episode, I think it's called Better Than Life, where everything up to that point was suddenly explained as if they were inside a game, they were playing a game, and their whole life was a virtual reality. It was the first time I'd heard of this like simulated reality thing. I looked at that and went, that makes sense of everything. That makes absolute sense of everything to me at the time. And since then, I've kind of been exploring that idea of what if it was a simulated reality, and then also what if kind of more broadly looking at the got into the different wisdom teachings, the different religions, the different systems of thought going, okay, so what if this is a collective consciousness? What does that actually mean? We act as if it isn't, but what if it is? Does that make sense of things? Or are there experiments that we can do, experiences that we can have, which convince us that it is either a collective consciousness or it's not? It's just a materialistic, relativistic world where everything just happens and then you die and it's gone, you know. So I wanted to explore with that. And I've got a little bit of a sciencey mind. I like experimenting with things, I like trying things out for myself rather than believing what people tell me. Big failing of mine to ignore what people tell me. Um, and so through that sort of experimented with um, different systems, as in just going in and trying them out. So I think I started with Taoism, which I played around with for 10 years maybe. Then a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of yoga, not the physical yoga, what did a bit of physical yoga, but the kind of the yoga philosophy, so Advaita, Vedanta sort of stuff. Went through those and all the way through thinking, what is the common thread between these? And then through that got into the exploring, okay, so what did the secret societies study? What do they believe? What were their origins? And then going back in time saying, okay, so what was the melting pot out of which all of these ideas came? And then within that, I started finding the people with superpowers, so the people who have trained themselves, you've got the there's been TV series where, you've got the warrior monks who can, slice a bullet in the air with blindfolded sort of thing. What powers do these people have? There's evidence of people being able to do amazing things with their minds and their bodies. What does that mean? Can I experience that? And so through playing with some of those and with the support of some of the teachers I had along the way, experienced some things, and then ended up I was ha- I was having a, I don't know, as you do, an argument on Facebook with someone in a comments section on a thread. And I very, very rarely go on now, and I very rarely did then, but there's something that really got me. And I was describing how I thought collective consciousness worked at the time, because, and what got me was that everyone was again, and it was like, there's an us and them thing. There is us who are good, and there are them that are evil, and talking about the secret societies and all of that sort of stuff. They're evil, we're good, and this big clash and this war between us. And I'm going, um, maybe that's not the case. If we are all a collective consciousness, we are all one. What does that mean? We need to integrate that side into ourselves at some point. We're here battling with it because of our perception of that at this time, our understanding, but we're battling with that anyway. So through all of that, ended up exploring that within a conversation, and one of the people on the thread said, I think you should go to this site and go and have a look. And it was called Super Beings. And they taught remote viewing, or awareness by location, as they call it. And so I just jumped in and thought, okay, I'll give it a go. So like the Buddhist sort of tenet, you could try it for yourself. So I tried it for myself, and it was like a duck to water. I just picked it up really quickly. Okay, this is easy. I can't believe I haven't done this before. And I can't believe this isn't taught to all children. And I ended up teaching it. I'm running workshops and so on. And kind of went through the process of learning that and teaching people. And I started going, there are a lot, I didn't find anyone who couldn't do it. And there were a lot of similarities in how people learned to do it and the things that they were seeing and how they were seeing it. So started navigating, okay, so learning how different people work and get into it, and then just developing it, knowledge about what people were seeing, what they weren't, depending on how they think. And then since then have gone on to look at, okay, that's real. I convinced myself that's real. Don't need to convince anyone else. Convince myself that that's real. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of a collective consciousness? How does that actually work? Okay, so there's a mechanism here. There's information being shared. How is that working? What works? What doesn't work? And then looking at other systems that come in as, okay, so what can we do with this? It's all very well going and looking at things, and we were doing it from a spiritual approach rather than let's go and look at the enemy base type of approach, but looking at it from a can we use it as a method of engaging with the bigger self? What is the self? Are there layers to us, and can we use this process to engage with those higher layers? I don't see it as higher, but it's just a more coherent version of yourself. And can you use it to communicate with that self and just open up the unconscious mind from this conscious self, unconscious self, to having that broader conversation? How do you talk to yourself in a better way? How do you figure things out in a better way? And what can you do with it? And so with a few people, we played around with, what is the limitation of what you can do with this? And through conversations, so not had the direct experience of doing it, but talking to others who are kind of advanced in the space, they're showing that there are some amazing things that you can do. So yeah, so that was part of that. And since then, sort of going on and looking into broader aspects of collective consciousness. How does it work? What does it mean? How do we find our purpose within a collective consciousness system? Do we need to be going out and trying to teach other people? It's always been this thing of, okay, I've got this information. Should we be trying to teach that or not? If we're a collective, then surely it's within the collective once you've experienced it. Looking at questions like, often we get the question, why are we here? And you keep on hearing the answer, to learn. Well, if we're a collective, we know everything already. So what's the point of coming into this world to learn? If it's not to learn, what is it to do? So things like that. So, and yeah, and you mentioned internal family systems, which is, I, through conversations with sort of people in the network going, we suddenly discovered that we've been all been sort of keeping this little secret amongst ourselves, in that we all saw ourselves as separate individuals within ourselves. So on a day-by-day basis, we might be a different personality. It's an actual switch. And it's not a disorder. It's not a multiple personality disorder. It's just multiple personalities, and we switch, and they can overlap, but they have different tastes, different ways of interacting with the world, just different ways of being. And they switch depending on circumstance or whatever, and started sort of exploring how that works. And one of the psychological theories that's been around for a while is internal family systems, which kind of touches on this, in that it's more about having parts of your mind that manage your experience, and parts of your mind that are kind of traumatized and hidden away. And then what happens? How do you manage those traumatized parts? So there's a good theory there, but that's accepting that we have multiple selves and different ones come in and out, and so it's an interesting space to explore. Anyway, I've rambled for a while there.
I'm very grateful. As you can see, I have a puppy, and he was
Your
barking
puppy
like
is
crazy in the
gorgeous.
background.
You're gorgeous.
Just like, I love him dearly, but he's a
What's he
handful
called?
at the moment. His name is Charlie.
Charlie. It's a good name.
He's not
Mm.
very old, very rambunctious. I was talking to somebody yesterday about
Mm.
the idea of, he's a healer, but
Yeah.
he was talking about the idea of multiple consciousnesses within us, and
Mm-hmm.
that disease has a sort of a consciousness, and
Yes.
that can be directed to leave a body,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting and
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
along the
And
lines of
you
what you're talking about.
and yeah, and that's part of it is if it's an all a collective thing, one of the ways of looking at that is everything that you see is a projection of your mind, is a projection of your unconscious mind in some way, a bit like a dream. And within that, every single aspect of it is conscious. That's the nature of a conscious universe, every part of it, and every part of it perceives the universe in a different way. We're just different windows on collective consciousness and perceive it in a different way. And so the trick then is building the connection. How do you communicate with the other parts in a way that they understand? Yeah. And so disease, yeah, it's one of those parts. And I wish I had
And
the knack of communicating with it myself, but knowing that other people do is great.
yeah, well, he does. And
Mm.
it's like, it's so interesting to me when you were talking about the collective consciousness being like windows, and I perceive the world in that we are all parts of the energy that is the universe, um,
Mm.
and that the energy itself, the consciousness, God, whatever,
Mm.
I perceive it as energy, that we are all parts of that, and that we express it in different ways. I'm not
Mm.
articulating this very well, mostly because I'm wrestling with the dog.
It's like the crazy puppy. Charlie.
Charlie, hold still.
Charlie.
Um, in that, in as as all being connected, and I believe
Mm.
that we are all connected. We're all
Mm.
just energy, and we're not even solid energy. We're just
Mm.
like, everything is always in motion. When you touch
Mm.
something else, like I'm wrestling with the dog, I'm
Mm.
transferring my electrons to the dog, and
Mm.
he's transferring his to me. So
Mm.
we are connected more tightly, in that not just the touching, but the actual,
Mm.
we are
Well,
joined.
if you rather than just a touch, you go to your simple electrical field, and your electrical fields are interacting, and a lot of information is shared across electrical fields, and you can see, look at the Joe Dispenza experiments around heart rate synchronicities. You go into a space, and if you go in a room, and your heart rate will synchronize with others in there
Mhm.
automatically, because you're connecting with the electrical field, and the heart has a massive electrical field that interacts with yours. So you're picking up a massive amount of information constantly from your environment, and also sharing your information out with it. And these are things that you can measure. So yeah, the effect of the dog, but then also the sensations you get, and the calming sensations of petting a dog. Maybe not when it's a crazy puppy. you've got you've got all of that, but you've got many things going on. So yeah, for sure, it's a very complex thing. And then one of the interesting ones here is you've got okay, so what about the bacteria? For me, this has been an interesting one in my kind of part of my workspace, is looking at, okay, so we're our bacteria inside of us, we're a massive collective organization with our bacteria. What influence do they have over us? And it turns out that it's huge. It's huge in terms of mood. They can be pumping out chemicals that make us want to go and eat sugar, for example, because that's what helps them to survive, or whatever. There's clear interactions within our bacteria, thinking, okay, so what are they doing? What do they want? Are they the ones driving the ship? We just a bacteria spacecraft. So there's
we
all
are
these
a
things to
we are
consider.
a collective as individuals. There's on a physical level, we're a collective of individual cells that
Mm.
are they're joined together to do
Mm.
specific jobs, but
Mm-hmm.
they live a life and die. They procreate. They
Yeah.
expel waste.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And each
like
each one's
coral.
seeing each one's seeing the universe from its own particular perspective and acting within it. So you come to that is like, often we think of ourselves as the top of the tree, but that makes no sense. The as above, so below. So the bacteria are living in this thing, and they're not aware of what's above them. They don't know. They're not aware that they're inside this human spaceship thing and traveling around, but they are. So then you start thinking, okay, so what are we inside? What are we not aware of?
Mm-hmm.
Which becomes a very interesting thing to explore. Some of the things that you can do with the remote viewing sort of techniques. It's hard
I
because you don't have the ability to describe things that you're perceiving.
I
That's a part of
remember a
that challenge.
movie, or not a movie, it was a radio show because I didn't have TV when I was young, but we did listen to the old radio shows. And one of the radio shows episodes that I remember listening to was about a guy who traveled to a, I want to say a marble or something, but it was a universe within the universe.
Mm,
And he lived and died, and somebody else went back to visit him like the next second, but he'd lived and died, and several generations had already passed by the time his
mm,
friend who just left
yeah,
right after he did got there.
yeah,
It's just like, and I probably heard that when I was 12 or
yeah, yeah.
13. I
Yeah, those
was
sorts
like,
of things, like, they stick, don't they? And he's like, is
yeah.
that how it is? Yeah.
And you
Looking at
wonder about it.
even looking at the different perceptions of time, how do different things perceive time? We know with um flies that you're trying to swat, they have a different frame rate, as in their brain is processing faster, experiencing time differently, which gives them the ability to move out the way. They'll probably seeing others going really slowly with trying to swat them. I think like, oh yeah,
And they
just hop
can
out
go
the
invisible too. I'm pretty sure they have cloaking devices.
way.
All you have
Yeah,
to do is bring the swatter out, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
know
They've gone. Yeah,
they're
turn
gone.
on the invisibility shields. Yeah. Mm.
They might have. I mean, it's like it's not an impossible thought.
No, no. Yeah, they're aware. With that, and then have you done the thing with this? Probably works best with. It's something I used to experience as a kid with cats, because they'd sit on your lap, and then you'd have the thought that, oh, I'm going to get up in a minute. I need to stand up. I need to go somewhere or whatever. And they would pick up on that thought and just look at you grumpily and jump off. That used to happen
Mhm.
to me all the time. It's just like, the cats were aware of your intention. And you're like, oh, but that's cats for you, generally grumpy.
Can communicate with animals. I try sometimes. I'll call
Yeah.
my cats without talking out loud, and they'll
Yeah.
come sometimes.
Sometimes.
About as
Yeah.
often as when I call them out loud.
Mm.
If you
Mm.
mention food, though, they're more likely to show up.
Yeah. 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 That's a good way to influence your experiments. Just slip in some food. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
So you were talking also about the descript multi-deity religions in terms
Yeah.
of family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So multi-deity. I mean, you look back in the past. We've had this single deity religion thing for a while before them,
It's
and
not
still
actual.
interesting, we have all the multi-deity ones, and you're going, what is that? I think as part of it, as I was looking, I was when I was doing the yoga philosophy work, there's a generally, but not completely accepted view that the myths about the gods are almost like psychology textbooks, as in here are different aspects of your personality played out as gods. And the stories about them are teachings around how to deal with different aspects of life, different experiences. So you can bring out a particular story to explain a particular situation, as if, you know, it's the equivalent of, you know, back then, you know, going to the psychologist, but it's just a stories that's told in schools around the campfire, wherever the stories were told. So it's they are a way of sharing how to handle situations. So the I guess the most, I don't know, the most famous one, but one really good example is the Bhagavad Gita. So the story of Arjuna and having his great battle, and within that, all of his enemies are kind of different aspects of ego, different aspects of his mind, and he's not wanting to battle them, but having to battle them and saying, you know, you're going to have to take on these things and vanquish these different sort of negative aspects of mind, and go to war. And so they kind of treating this battle with yourself as an ongoing war that you can win, but you have to choose to go into it and take it on. So this whole fight with the ego thing, and I kind of go along with that. I think there's a lot of people beat themselves up about their ego, and I think it's an integral, useful part of us. There's a lot of this sort of battle against it. But yeah, so that's just one of those traditions where actually the multiple gods probably just really good stories to help people with whatever psychological issues that they're having. Yeah. And so I found, you know, looking at reading those stories in that way is really helpful. And a lot of them have the drive to go in and seek the self, as in, what is your true self? What is there is a part of you which is untainted by kind of the environment, what's going around with you and your experience and the experiences you've had in your life, which have had a negative effect. There's a part of you that's kind of free of that. Get in touch with that part, because that part really knows what to do. It knows why you're here. It knows how to handle situations. And so a lot of the techniques sort of keep on coming back to that. What's the method to go and talk to the self? And it seems that's one of the common themes across everything, is just find that part. Because that part can guide you. And again, that comes through in the Bhagavad Gita, as having, you know, the God come down and support you. That's yourself. That's the self as God.
What are your thoughts on the ego as it is like perceived with multiple personalities?
Mm. Um, it's I mean, it's a tricky one, I think. You know, tackling the question of the ego. I think you've got I think if you talk about it from the kind of the Buddhist and the Taoist nature, there's two ways of sort of looking at it, not sort of directly head on to the ego, but you have the concept of suffering, because this is what the ego kind of does. It comes along and it experiences these things, and it generally suffers. You've got, in Buddhism, you've kind of got your attachments and desires, and your ignorance are things that cause you to suffer, and it's your ego that's then suffering. Your true self is kind of looking on, going. And within Taoism, you kind of got this disharmony with nature. It's kind of almost the same thing, and you're kind of resisting nature. You're going against nature. You're going against your own nature, and you're going against these sort of environmental nature. And because of that, because you choose to go against your true self, what your self wants, then you suffer. And so it ends up being this whole ego equals suffering type of thing. It's not quite the same thing, but it is the part of you that is separate from yourself, that is the bit that suffers, and that bit is the sort of the ego, which is managing your day-to-day relationship with the world. So it comes back to, okay, so what is the best way to get rid of that suffering? The best way to live in the world is where a lot of those wisdom teachings come back. It keeps on coming back to connect with yourself, which is where all the meditation thing comes from. Connect with yourself and ask yourself those questions, because yourself has the best answers. And that's lots of the methods just all point to that. And so there's different techniques for getting to the self. And I found doing, back to the remote viewing, I found that to be a very effective way to meditate in a way. I'm not a very good meditator. I've tried meditating for years, and I sat there with all the other people that were awesome at meditating, and it was like thoroughly depressing when everyone else was so good at it. And I was like, such a real struggle, and did struggle and struggle. And I kind of got the hang of it ish, but found doing the moving meditations, as in walking ones, were good, but then doing the remote viewing as a meditation was awesome, because you're constantly occupying on what you're doing. So come back to that. You distract your local self by writing things down, by sketching, by doing things. It gives it something to do, and you're freeing the other side. And you can think of it as a left brain, right brain thing. You've got your left brain as the kind of like the organizer, the gatherer of information, the packaging of it into a neat bundle. The right is off collecting everything, just going crazy and grabbing everything it can. And you kind of going through this exercise of distract the left by getting it to write everything down, just give it a job to do, and allow the other side freedom and build the connection between the two. So you're getting information flowing from one to the other. The left is then processing that in a neat little package. And the trick to it all was to stop the left side, the processor, from making assumptions, from jumping to conclusions. And that was it. So the exercise in meditation was gradually lengthening the time you could push the left side, this processor, from overwhelming you with its assumptions about the information, because you'd be getting information in that's really sketchy. So the example we would give to beginners is that, okay, so you get the feeling, tends to come in feelings rather than visuals, and you've got the feeling of sun, sea, and sand, or sun in your skin, there's water, and there's a feeling of sand. Your left is going, you're on a beach, you're on a beach, you're on a beach. But it could be anything. You can think of the number of circumstances where you could have sand and sun and water together. There's so many different permeations of that, but the left has made the assumption that you're on a beach. So the exercise then is just to gradually stretch out that time that you can avoid making assumptions. And what that does is it allows much more information to flow in, to be in the moment, to be in a flow state. And the other side is, you've promised the left side, the processor, I will allow you to make your conclusions. I will allow you to try and figure things out. I'll allow you to play Sherlock Holmes in an hour. Just for now, you need to go and gather as much information as you can to make an accurate deduction, and then I'll let you play. And that's the exercise. And you just simply doing that does wonders just simply as a meditation, whether or not the information you're getting is of any use. So you hit a point where actually what you're gathering doesn't matter. But it turns out it's really interesting, because you can corroborate your information with other people's. You can get really very accurate things and similarities and so on. So it can be very useful. So that's, for me, what I found is that one of the best meditations.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like just lost my train of thought. I, I've done a lot of meditating, and I've gone on Akashic journeys, and it's like you're letting your brain, just one side of your brain, just accept what it's seeing, just capturing the images, and then the other side is, the only job it has is to record what you're seeing. That's interesting.
And it's interesting. And and for me, working across lots of different people, the mistakes become one of the things I found is mistakes are really interesting. As in, you get commonality of mistakes. So mistakes is when you apparently drift off the target. So you set a target. So give you the mechanism for it that actually interesting to talk about how I think this works. But I, as a target setter, come up with a target, and I might have a photograph, or I might have a description, or I might have something, and I give that I make up a code for it, just a code number, and I give the viewer the code number, and their job is then to essentially meditate on that and write down what they see. And yeah, often they'll go and they'll gather similar information and get on target, and you can show people they're on target by showing the photograph. But they're not seeing the photograph, they're going to the place and time. So you get a 360-degree view. So you're getting more information than there is in a photograph. And one of the, in fact, it was the beginner target, the very first target I used to use with people commonly, and it was a simple picture of a tree. So I took it and I knew what was behind me. I deliberately took it because of sort of previous experience. So there's a picture of a tree, and behind me there was a metal fence. You couldn't see that in the photograph, but just about every person who went to that target described the metal fence as well as the tree. In fact, the metal fence is easier to see than the tree. Things in nature are generally harder to see than man-made things. And so you'd commonly get people seeing the thing that you didn't set as the target, but you know it's there. And so I started paying attention to those so-called mistakes, things where you look like you're off target, and certain places come up. And you talked about the kind of the Akashic library. I'm kind of different, and I've quite a few people surprise themselves to going to this space, which is a circular library with circular ringed floors, which kind of rotate in the kind of metallic-y stone things. But there's books or globes which contain information going around the walls. And there's this sort of the central space where you go, like a dais, like a lectern, and where you read the information. And when people have been on, it could be off going to see Stonehenge or something, and then, or a rock formation and with buffaloes on the top of it, and they'll find themselves there and describing this place, and I'm going, hang on, that's nothing to do with the target. But so there were a series of places that were common that people would drift to by mistake, but their descriptions were very similar. So started exploring those spaces because, whether or not, and again, this is that for me, it doesn't matter if the remote viewing thing is a real phenomenon. A lot of people can just go, oh, it's just fake and people making things up. Cool, it's people making things up, but they're making the same thing up without prompting. That's really interesting. And start going. So those anomaly, one thing, remote viewing itself is an anomaly, and then you've got the anomalies within the anomalies, and you're going, okay, that thing is really, really interesting to pursue and describe and draw and sketch, and then see how many other people are seeing those, and is that significant or not. And one of the issues, and this is coming back to how I think this works, is that what people are viewing, how they're connecting, is they're connecting with the setter of the target's mind, not the image. And they're connecting with the setter's mind, not in the time that they set the target, but after the information has been gathered, which is a weird thing. So they're viewing out of time. So their information is outside of time. So they can be gathering information that, if you've got a bunch of different people looking at the same space, my view of that space will be, at the end of the exercise, will be the collective view of everyone. And what I find is that what people are seeing is not, it relates to the collective view rather than my individual, my starting view. So they're viewing things outside of time. So they're seeing things in my mind. So what I deliberately then set out doing was to explore that, was to go, rather than setting and writing down a target, I just said, I have a target in my mind. Go and have a look and see what it is. And the majority of people, it didn't make any difference to their practice and how they were doing things. They still saw the target. So I hadn't written anything down. It was just something, an image I was holding in my head, or a place that I was holding in my head that I'd been to, and I'd just like sit and imagine that, and then they would go and see that, and they were looking inside my head. So the only way that can work, and so the data and the commonality of the data and the accuracy of data coming in, the only way that could work was that actually we're connected somehow. And so that then goes into those broader explorations of, okay, so what does that collective mean? How does that work? How do we all connect with each other? What consequences does that have in our day-to-day lives? So yeah, that's my snapshot of some
In
of
a
those
way,
remote
everyone's
experiences.
psychic,
Oh, for sure, for sure.
because
I
that
haven't,
is
I say I didn't find
that's all you're talking
anyone.
about.
Didn't find anyone. I think you even the people who came in and said, "I think this is nonsense. I don't think this is real." And you just take them through some of the beginner exercises, they start seeing things going that they can't explain to themselves. And oh, there are too many coincidences to explain away. So even the most resistant sort of people, as long as they'll give it a go, you kind of got some good results. So that's lots of fun with that. And so then working with other people, say, okay, so what other things can we do with this now that we know that we can do this? What do we go and look at? It's an interesting question because you're not restricted by time, so you can look at things in the past, and then one is like, can you talk to people in the past? Can you influence things that have happened? And then we had some circumstances where you go, actually, yes, there are things that you can. There is potential. There are things that we kind of explored and went, oh yeah, probably we shouldn't be doing that. But then actually exploring with the self, and the self's going, whatever. The past is the past. The past is malleable. The past can change. The past is just our shared perception of something that's happened, and that shared perception can change. So, yeah, that's a
But
fun
it might
space
not
to
even
play
be
around.
real.
Yeah, well, no,
The
it's not.
shared
It's
perception that
not
we
solid. There's
have
nothing there.
today is different than the shared perception that the world had according to the historical things that have been passed down to us. It's
Mm.
a way different than what we
Yeah,
perceive it as today.
yeah. I mean, the majority of the time, well, yes, it can change, and then yeah, it's in the history's in the eye of the beholder, and a people trying to explain something complex with simple words on it, and making it as short as possible. You go back and look at some of those things, it's way more complex and nuanced, and um, going into the motivations of people's very interesting thing to get people to do. Just go and sit inside someone's mind in that side of that circumstance and just observe what they're thinking becomes one of those more advanced sort of things that you can mess about with, and you learn a lot from that. You go, oh yeah, maybe people who are perceived as evil, again back to that evil thing of it, if we're a collective, that's part of us. Why were they doing the things that they were doing? What did they believe? Why did they believe that? It's kind of an interesting exercise to go with the self and go, yep, we're all back to that, we're all one, and we don't understand other people's motivations ever. And if we are all multiple selves, then who knows how many different versions of each person there are to deal with. We just see one and say, oh, they're a bit changeable. um you got these people in history or people in power or whatever, they've got multiple versions of themselves appearing each day, some with different, sometimes with conflicting opinions. It's yeah,
But
again,
sometimes they're
makes
actually
for
physically different people appearing
mm,
and being passed off as a person, as
sure,
one person.
yep, mm,
It just
yeah,
happens. Nigel,
mm,
this has been amazing. How can people continue the conversation with you?
sure, if they're interested. So I've open to sort of one-on-one chats, and I might set up some group chats and group discussions or group training on the remote viewing if there's interest. But go to conscious.kiwi, so that's my website. Also for my work stuff where I do kind of innovation projects on conscious projects, on conscious activities. So yeah, conscious.kiwi, and on there's sort of different ways of connecting, but one of them is just via email. So hello@conscious.kiwi. Yeah, I'm happy to continue conversations with people, bearing in mind sort of limitations of time and life. Yeah.
You had to travel back in time to visit with us today, so there's that.
Yeah, here from the future.
They're from the future. So, what's the one thing you want to leave the audience with today?
Okay. So out of all of the wisdom traditions that I've explored, the one thing that is consistent across all of them is the internal battle between status quo and change. The self is all about change. The true self is all about change and being in the flow. So you go to Taoism, you just constantly be in the flow, effortless action, be in the flow. But the local self is going, I feel safe doing this thing. I'm going to stay doing my thing and not change. So you've got this on continual battle between resistance to change and the desire to change. And um, pick a system, whichever it is, that all help step towards how do you make those changes? How do you make that choice? I have a system that I like using, that I sort of figured out. But yeah, so don't resist change. Embrace change. Change is your friend. Change is the connection to yourself. That's my thing.
This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining
My
me today,
pleasure.
Nigel.
Mm.